According to the New York Times, the FBI has warned Hope Hicks, the White House communications director, about repeated attempts by Russian operatives to contact her during the transition. Meantime, a key member of Robert Mueller's investigative team is revealed to have close ties to Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, a development that is generating huge concerns from many Republicans of a potential bias in Mueller's office. Let's bring in our panel. Ned Ryan is the founder of American Majority and a former writer for President George W. Bush, and Scott Bolden, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for talking to us. All right, so this is further proof, Ned, that of brazen attempts by Russian operatives to meddle in the presidential election. It also proves that Ms. Hicks did nothing improper. What does this do to Mueller's investigation?
Absolutely nothing. All it does is actually prove what we've known for decades and decades. Russia has tried to meddle in U.S. elections, and quite frankly, the Obama administration was warned almost 2 years before the 2016 elections that Russia was going to increase its efforts to impact and try and influence democratic elections in the West. So, to me, this is nothing. We just got further proof that Russia, after decades and decades of already meddling or trying to meddle in our elections and influence them, is still doing that. So I don't really think this does anything except for, again, it's more breathless, heavy breathing from the left of more proof that there might have been collusion. No, just shows that Russia, again, was meddling and trying to meddle in our elections. But, Julie, the thing that, again, is really becoming very apparent in this last week, this Mueller investigation, I don't think that anybody with any objectivity can say that his team is not a pack of highly partisan wolves who are on a political witch hunt trying to nullify the 2016 elections. You mentioned Anthony Weissman, but Jeannie Rhee, who represented the Clinton Foundation, and also Ben Rhodes, Obama's NSA director. Now you have Aaron Zebley, who represented Justin Cooper, who put Hillary Clinton's private email servers together and actually destroyed some of her BlackBerries. I think, in many ways, any legitimacy that it might have had, this Mueller investigation, I think is gone. And I would argue it didn't have much legitimacy to begin with.
Okay. The look on Scott's face tends to disagree with that. Scott, go ahead.
Well, I don't think anybody's surprised that I'm going to disagree with that. As a former prosecutor, let me just say this. There is no litmus test for whether you can become a prosecutor or not because of your politics and your First Amendment. If that gets in the way of doing a fair and independent investigation, then you'll be removed, like one of those Mueller investigators were. But the allegation that somehow these lawyers represented Hillary Clinton in a prior life or all of these types of issues, it's just not a litmus test, and the DOJ rules say so. So I think it's a bunch of noise. But I will say this. Ken Starr was a Republican and investigated Bill Clinton. Nobody liked that. But until it gets in the way of a fair and independent investigation, the very Republicans criticizing are the very Republicans that praised Mueller's selection 6 months ago. Remember,
Scott,
the Republicans selected Mueller.
Hold that thought. Scott, I got to ask you, I mean, the entire investigation into the Trump-Russia collusion was in large part, as you know, due to the fake Fusion GPS dossier, which was funded by the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mueller's team is largely partisan. Do you not see any credibility issues here?
At best, you may have some appearance issues, but I disagree with the notion that report was the reason why, which drove the Mueller investigation. The GOP leadership, hold on one second, there were at least 50 contacts during and after the election of Donald Trump that drove this investigation and drove the Republicans in the House, Senate, as well as DOJ to say this needs to be investigated. The other thing that drove this investigation was the fact that Russia was meddling in something that was sacred to our American democracy, and that's our elections. And that ought to be investigated, and Republicans and Democrats both ought to do that.
Ned, go ahead.
But Scott, the difference, there's a massive difference between Russian meddling, which we all agree they've been attempting to do for decades, and this fairy tale of Trump-Russia collusion, which, as Julie pointed out, was in many ways based on this fake Fusion GPS dossier, again funded by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC. At the end of the day, and again, I think the thing that's even more troubling about that dossier, Julie, now we're starting to suspect that Peter Strzok, the highly partisan FBI member of Mueller's team, might have used that as justification for FISA warrants to spy on Team Trump. I think the only silver... Wait, Scott. The only silver lining, Julie, of this Mueller investigation, I think, is it shows where the real investigation should be into the highly corrupt and highly politicized DOJ, FBI, and even our intelligence community.
You know, the problem with those allegations and that presentation is that it's all based on conjecture, if you will. The Republicans and the Trump campaign had over 50 contacts with Russia. And yes, Russia was digging deep into the Trump campaign, and Donald Trump, quite frankly, they were digging back, because collusion is an act, if you will. It's not a crime. It's not a result. And we know there's evidence that there was conversations going back and forth about getting Clinton material to help Donald Trump win.
The reason for the investigation was to prove.
Hold
on a second. The reason for the investigation was to prove collusion, to prove that President Trump, or then candidate Trump, actually colluded with the Russians. He was in Vladimir Putin's back pocket, and that he worked with. I understand, but there is no evidence at this point that the president was directly involved in any of this. Of course, we know that the Russians wanted to meddle in our election. They've tried to meddle in every presidential election.
But isn't that worth investigating?
They felt like they had some leeway here. Listen,
isn't that worth investigating?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just saying at this point the collusion has not been proven. There's no smoking gun. That's what I'm trying to say.
Democrats aren't.
Wait, I got to say one other thing, because Scott, you mentioned about how there's an appearance, text messages that are clearly aimed at anti-Trump, pro-Hillary, coming from a member of the FBI. He was removed, but he still works for the FBI. He's no longer involved with the special counsel, but he still works for the FBI, which makes you wonder, shouldn't the FBI be partisan or bipartisan?
No,
you don't
believe?
In fact, when there's investigations being done by political officials, who's watching the watchdogs?
It ought to be independent.
There's no watchdog group watching the watchdogs.
But it's not independent.
It's the FBI and DOJ. They should be independent. Politics shouldn't even be involved in it. I agree with you there.
But that's the problem,
you got to remove the politics from it.
James Comey. Example number one.
Eric Holder.
He's gone too.
Loretta Lynch.
All right.
She's gone too.
Hey, my producers wrapped me like 12 minutes ago or something like that.
Let us go. We got a lot more to say, don't we?
I do too.
Thanks, Julie.
All right. I'll see you guys later. Thanks.
Thank you.
Scott and Ed.